eyes wide open. Step into the shadows. If you think the stories are just myths, think again. Now let's take a look.
Want to hear something scary? Don't stay out at night. Don't run in the woods. If you hear something, no you didn't. If you see something, no you don't.
In the night, close the curtains and the woods don't whistle. Broom by the door, Hanks count every bristle. If you're walking and you hear your name, walk faster, don't run. If you run, you'll pray.
Is it, am I tripping or is that? There's someone sitting on my couch, but like, there's no one there. What? Like, there's no one there. There's no one on the couch. Oh my God, it's gone.
This one's about cryptids, another creepy story. So to preference this, I grew up at the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains in North Alabama. So it's always been well in the foundation of me growing up being superstitious, being paranormal is real. Still to this day, I believe it. And cryptids and something out there that's not human. Well, this field, we lived in these four neighborhoods. These four neighborhoods were connected by fields, large fields. If you grew up in the country, you know what I mean. Large fields. These fields ran behind all these neighborhoods. My friends and I could go through these fields, get to the neighborhoods, get to each other's houses, play in these fields, ride in these fields, do whatever. We actually had an agreement with the farmer, stay out of crops, you can ride in the field, whatever, be respectful. We were. Well, anyways, it's always been told these fields have been there for a long time. My grandmother moved into where we grew up in the 60s, and those fields have always been there. And stories always been told as a Native American burial ground. We were always very respectful of if we ever seen grave markings, all that's another story. But anyways, we were always careful is what I'm saying. We always knew something was out there. Well, this one time we were walking through the field, like I said, going from my house, looping around to my friend's house so we didn't have to go down the road. And we were walking, me, my best friend at the time, my cousin. Cousin was riding backwards on a bike. We were just talking, shooting. And we were making noise, we were laughing, talking shit, and the brush wooded area behind us erupted and shaking and moving around. We, spooked us a little bit. We cautiously moved forward, and this thing, large, I'm 6'4" now, I've always been big. This thing was massive, whatever it was. It may have been Bigfoot, it may have been something. Whatever it was not human. It was very large. And it come out of the woods, and the only way I can explain is it had to have been trying to scare us. It come out of the woods and it was just standing there menacingly right at the edge of the woods. And it was huge. It was within 15 feet of us, pitch black. Middle of the night, only thing that was illuminating our way was the moon. Well, elbows was running full speed away, stopped in a clearing. Right past, we were at the bottom of a hillish area. We went up top of the hill, and we're looking down. He was gone. Well, time passes, we'd kind of forgotten a little bit, and me and my friend were walking to my house, me and my cousin. We were walking through corn, so we were, if you've ever been around corn's huge. We were walking around the corn to get to the neighborhood, and the brush to our left, same brush, other side of the brush, another field. About 100 yards, it started violently shaking like something was running through it. And before me and my friend could even look at each other or even realize, something come full speed running out of the woods. Well, again, we were running very fast, and this thing was almost catching up. It would have caught up with us if we had to run any farther, but we hit the cut, ran into the street light where it was illuminating, and this thing went off into the corn. Only reason we went into the corn is because the corn is very tall, and you could hear it, and you could see this silhouette of something going in the corn. If you've ever been around corn, it's very tall. Like I said, this thing was like pushing away the corn, and it was very large. I was over 6 feet at the time. This thing had at least 2.5 feet on me. So that's just a warning. If you live in the Appalachian Mountains, there's something out there.
In 2007, when I was 17 years old, I was living with a good friend of mine that I went to school with. And one day when we were not home, we had taken the dogs to the vet, and his house burned to the ground. And we weren't there, so it was like kind of a good thing, but the insurance company paid for us all to move into this, like it was a nice house. It was like 17 years old, but it was built at the edge of town, kind of near this like farming like field area in South Carolina. I want to say this was August when the house burned, and so we lived in this house for like 3 months, and weird things started happening that at the time they were happening we didn't pick up on. Like there was this alarm system on the house, and it would sometimes in the middle of the night would go off. It had like a door alarm. It wasn't like connected to anything, like it wasn't active, but it would still like chime when the doors was opened. And one night we woke up to like the alarm just going off like crazy, and we could not get it to turn off. Like it would not turn off. And finally, after a couple hours, it like turned off. It was so loud, I remember. And we're like, that's weird, like, but didn't really think anything of it. So flash forward to Halloween night of all nights, 2007. This is back when you still had like computer rooms kind of. And so the computer was in the den. I was like on the computer, and I hear my friend upstairs, and he's calling. He's like, what? Like, what do you want? Like, da-da-da, like going off. And finally he comes downstairs and he's like, are you calling me? And I said, no, like, what do you mean? He said, well, the house number is calling my cell phone. I was like, it's not me. And he said, well, it's not my mom, and she's upstairs, and she's handicapped, by the way, so it's just an important part of the story, so she can't really get around. And we're like, no, it's not me. So he was like, okay, well, it keeps calling. So he goes back upstairs. A few minutes later, he comes running downstairs, and he's like, look, like the house number is calling my cell phone. And you answer the phone and immediately hang up. We're like, that's weird. Like, okay, like, and it keeps doing this, and we're like, this is weird. Like, this is like the house number kept calling his cell phone. So later that night, we're like upstairs, and we hear this noise, and we go into the bathroom, and all the water, like all the sinks were on, and all the drawers in the bathroom were open. Like all the doors and everything were just opened. So we freak out, and we all go into his mom's room. And so at this time we do like, I can't remember, like star 69 or star whatever, where you can call the last number from the house, like out. So we were doing that on the house phone, and we call out, and every time we did it, it wouldn't call his cell phone. It would call the last number out that was called from the house number. So we ended up going to bed, and my friend's dating this girl at the time, and her brother, and he calls her next day and tells her about it, and she comes over, and they're like, oh, we're in a haunted house, like, we're kind of like joking about the whole thing at this point. So later that night, on the second night 2, we go get Chinese food. I remember we went and got Chinese food, and we're on the way back home, like driving down the road that this house is on. And as we're driving down the road, we see his mom's car going in the opposite direction. So we turn around and we go catch up with him. And we're like, what are y'all doing? And his mom is like, the power went out in the house, like, but only on the first floor. And they were inside the house, and the power went out, and it freaked them out, so they just left. So we drive back to the house, and sure enough, we get there, and the power is out on the first floor, but is on the second floor. So there's a front door and like a staircase that goes upstairs, and my friend's room was up there. So we run into the house, run up the stairs, and go get his phone. He had left it charging, and sure enough, while we were gone, he had all these missed calls from the house number. So shortly after, the phone rings again from the house number, and we answer, and this time, instead of hanging up immediately, there's just like a silence. It's deafening. And then it hangs up. So we're all scared. We all sleep in the same room that night. Wake up the next day, and this time on day 3, the phone starts ringing like earlier in the day. And we had all stayed, like my friend's girlfriend and her brother had stayed. And so her brother Tucker was like, I'm going to answer it next time it calls us. So phone starts ringing and he answers it. And I'm not sure. He just like bursts into tears. And we're like, what's going on? Like, what's happening? And he was like, it made a noise. It made a noise. So he ends up leaving. The girlfriend ends up leaving. And at this point, it's just me, my friend, and his mom in the house. And I'm on the computer, and all of a sudden I hear my friend like screaming, like a blood curdling scream. And before I can even get up, he's like in the room with me. And he said, I heard what Tucker heard. And I was like, what do you mean? Like, what did you hear? He said, it made this noise. Like, he said, I was on the phone and I was talking to my girlfriend and I got a call. So I switched over and not realizing, and it was the house number. And he said, when it calls next, you have to answer it. And I'm like, okay, like, I'll answer it. So like, it must have been like 45 minutes later, the phone rings. And it's the house number. And I remember it had this specific ringtone that the house number had. So when you'd hear that sound, it was just like creepy. So it rings and I answered it. Put my ear up to the phone and I say, hello? And there's no sound, no nothing. And I say hello. And then all of a sudden, it makes this sound like, to this day, I've never heard anything like it. It didn't sound like a person, but it sounded like it was like a low growl, and it just got louder and louder and louder, but when I heard it, like, I immediately, like, just tears started coming down my face and every hair stood up and I had to go sit down. Like, it, like, took my breath away. It was so scary. Meanwhile, as this is happening, like, those drawers in the bathroom and the sink keep opening. Like, every time we go up there, we keep opening. And there's this closet door that just keeps opening. Like, it's an attic door that was in the room that I actually slept in, which I don't think I ever slept in that room again during this. But that night, you know, my friend is, like, telling his brother about this. And he, like, comes over and he's like, one of y'all is doing this, like, one of you is messing with it, like, whatever. So we're like, well, we're going to do, like, a seance, like, not a seance, but like a thing to get this whatever out of the house. So we buy the stuff, we light the candles, we're, like, saying the prayer in each room, and we're putting salt bags over the door, and we're downstairs. We did upstairs first, and then we go downstairs, and as we're downstairs, my friend goes upstairs, and he just starts screaming again, like I'd never heard this before from him, like 2 times in one day. And he's like, who did this? Who did this? And so we all run upstairs and look. And we go into the bathroom and there's shaving cream sprayed all over the mirror, all over the Bible that we had left in there. And that was when we were like, nobody would do that. Like, it was all over the Bible. And we were like, what the hell? Like, and so that night, stuff like just got real. Like, basically the phone calls started getting like a much more like frequent. We call my friend's brother to come over and we're like, you've got to help us. Like, something's going on. He's like, I don't believe that, like, one of y'all is doing this. And so he comes over and he's standing in the kitchen, and he's like, in the same breath as he's saying, like, one of y'all is doing this, all of a sudden we hear this loud noise, and across the room, a can, like a soda can, flies down the stairs, hits the floor, and slides in the other direction. And he turned around and he started begging his mama, please leave this house. Please leave this house.
Where I come from, there's stories that you don't want to tell or hear in the dark. I grew up in the foothills of the Blue Ridge in western North Carolina. So this is my spooky story of my experiences in Appalachia. Start seeing tree branches just flying through the wind, like Wizard of Oz style, just whoosh. So we realized it's definitely time to turn around. So we are turning around, 3-point turn thing, as I'm in the passenger seat, he's driving, as his headlights sweep into the inky, vast, void blackness of the woods. All of a sudden, all of these lights just appear. I've never seen anything like it. Kind of like after the fireworks go off, the little sparkles come down. Sort of like those kind of lights. Or like, you've literally got a sparkler and all the little sparkle. Kind of like that, right? And the thing is, it's too early for fireflies. My birthday's March 3rd. It was that weekend. It's too early for fireflies. Even if there were fireflies, there's no way in that wind they could have all stayed in one spot. And there was a lot of them. All right. Just immediately, with a millisecond, my brain is like mundane before mystical. I could not make sense of it. I couldn't make sense of it. Not with that wind going. That wasn't animals. That wasn't a tree marker. That wasn't fungi. That wasn't fireflies. None of it made sense with the severity of the wind. And, the way that animals move, that was not the way that low to the ground reflections of animals are moving. All right. So we see it and my jaw just drops. I'm like, I look at my boyfriend, I'm like, oh, did you see that? He was like, oh, did you see that? And what did you see? What did you see? And we start talking. Like, this all happens very quickly. All right. He saw the lights that were like more gold than blue, but hints of blue. I saw the lights that were more blue than gold and hints of gold. We were just like, okay. We went on back down the mountain, just flabbergasted. We're like, what the hell did you see? So we go back down the mountain. I've got my tarot cards with me, of course. I'm pulling cards or whatnot. And they're like, that was old. What you just saw was really, really old. Like that thing, whatever it was you saw, that was ancient. And then for some reason, my boyfriend, he wanted to turn around and go back up. And I was like, that's not a good idea. I pulled the cards and the cards are like, don't do that, right? He was like, I'm going to do it. And I was like, well, all right, I guess we're going to do it. So we turned around and went back. To this day, I don't know what we were thinking. I mean, I've seen enough horror movies. I grew up out there, for crying out loud. He grew up there, like, we know better. But we still went back up. It was actually really uneventful. We didn't see anything else. So we drive even further up. We passed where we had turned around. We didn't see anything, so we kept going. And not much longer, we see the Rangers parked up there. And they see us, so we turn around, and they follow us down the mountain. They had kicked everybody out. I'm honestly surprised they didn't pull us over. But when we came back down, we went all the way down this time. My boyfriend says that the ranger closed the gate behind us. So, that gate was not supposed to be open, clearly. I've spent a lot of time trying to figure out what I saw. And recently, I came up with some conclusions thanks to some help with ChatGPT. So the fact that my man and I are both from there, and both of our families go back to the late 1780s when both sides of our family settled in North Carolina, Tennessee, Appalachian Mountains. The fact that we were in Cades Cove and all of the spooky history around there and all the hauntings, and seeing crazy lights like that is apparently a thing. ChatGPT talks about something that, being from there, I've already known, but it was fun to see ChatGPT come up with it and just say it on its own. Those mountains have a consciousness that they recognize you if you're from there when you come home. ChatGPT's theory is that gate was open for a reason. We were being invited in to see something, especially with all of the Cherokee historical spookiness that goes on there. And my boyfriend has a lot of Cherokee blood in him. I actually don't, but he does. So ChatGPT's theory is that he and I were recognized and being invited. It could have been the will-o'-the-wisp. It could have been fairies in a sense, but mostly ChatGPT thinks it was the guardian spirits of the Cherokee who were there before us. They recognized us because we're from there. So that's that story. That one will stick with me for the rest of my life. Absolutely guaranteed. That one was crazy.
Spooky story time about Estill County / Irvin. Irvin, Kentucky is what I'm talking about. And I had just vended the Mountain Mushroom Festival. And I stayed the night there for a couple nights. And I had a very interesting experience. And it's very cool, actually. So let me tell you what happened. So I was there at night. And, I just started noticing the activity everywhere. I started seeing, shadow figures, and there was tons and tons of them. Some of them were Civil War soldiers, and some were old mountain healer type ladies, and they were all around me, and they were just around me at night. And I felt very protected around them. They actually made me feel, though they were ghosts, I guess, they kept telling me that they were related to me and that I didn't have anything to worry about and that I was safe and nobody was going to mess with me at night. So I do have family from Eastern Kentucky. I didn't think that I had any family from Estill County that I knew of, at the time. And, I actually was thinking, gosh, I got to go to bed. So I even kind of said out loud, like, y'all are a little intense. I have got to go to sleep. I've got to get up in the morning. So this is cool. Been nice knowing you. Got to go to bed. So about 2 minutes before my alarm goes off, I feel someone it's almost like someone sat down on the corner of my bed and nudged my shoulder and said, it's time to get up. It was a man, and he looked like a Civil War soldier. And I looked at the clock, and it was 2 minutes before my alarm went off. Okay, was to go off. And I was like, wow, this thing touched me, right? So I kind of have this strange feeling all day or whatever. I go home and I tell my mom about it. And she says, well, yeah, you do have family there. And I was like, what? So we looked up our family last names and, it confirmed that they were from there. She already knew that though. And what was interesting is where I was very, very close to the cemetery that where my family members were buried. I was about, 100 yards away from where their burials were, come to find out. And one more little fun bit I wanted to add that just kind of adds to the story is the next morning, I noticed that there were just out of nowhere, I'd never noticed it. There was like Estill County Museum. And I was like, and it was before they were open early and, it was before. And so I was like, I got to walk in there for some reason. I have to go in there. I don't know what kind of museum this is, but I need to go in there. I walk in and it's mostly genealogy. Like it looked like they had a bunch of genealogy books laid out. And the lady in there said, hey, go in the other room and check the room out. And it was just full of Civil War memorabilia. And I just got this feeling that like I was connected to this stuff somehow too. And I was like, no. And I didn't even look at the book. I was like, you're just being weird. Like, I don't even know. But it was like something told me to go in there and like, look. And I didn't actually see any of their names or read anything, but I just got this feeling in there. And that was before I knew. So it's just very interesting.
Have you heard of the Moon-eyed people? No? Let me tell you about them. My name's Chelsea Knight. I'm a UK indie horror author and I research UK's folklore, myths and legends. However, today I'm in the Appalachian Mountains. So I thought I'd do some from here. The Moon-eyed people are pale beings that can't survive sunlight. The legends come from the Cherokee and the stories are unsettling. They are described as small pale beings with huge black eyes. They're so sensitive to light that they only come out at night. They live in caves, tunnels, and deep in the forest. Hikers in the 1970s said they saw small creatures watching them from cabins and caves at dusk. But they can't have been people. They were too small. Their eyes too dark, too big. And when they approached them, the figures slipped back into the crevices. Some Cherokee stories say the Moon-eyed people were driven underground centuries ago, but others say they're still here, hiding in the mountains.
My mom was a mimic. I was asleep in my mom's room. My mom's room, I lived in an old house, and my room was actually like a part of the old structure. And my mom had a room built on that was like this big master bedroom. So I'm laying in bed. I'm about to go to sleep in her room. We had watched movies in there, and then my mom just kind of left me in there. Well, she had a window over here, and the blinds were like, you could just barely see through the blinds. They were cracked. But we had security lights all around our property. So if anybody walked past them or anything, they would activate, but they didn't just stay on. That way it would let us know if someone was around the house. Well, in this scenario, I'm laying down in bed and I hear a whistle. That's not uncommon in Appalachia to hear a whistle or something of that nature. Well, I ignored it. I know what you're thinking. You ignored that. But yeah, in Appalachia, that's what you do. You hear stuff like that and then you ignore it. That's just what you do. If you acknowledge it, that's when things start to get a little weird, okay? They like attention. Whatever it is. I'm laying in the bed and then it's whatever it is, it starts like scratching at the window. So I don't see anything though. The security light's not going on. So then I'm just like, I don't know. I'm not going to freak out yet, you know. I feel like most kids would have freaked out by now, by the way. So the fact that I didn't freak out yet, pretty impressive now that I'm looking back on it. So I start hearing something outside the window and it almost sounds like whispers. And then the security light comes on, go past the window, and it's tall. It covered the whole window and then it was gone. So at this point, I panicked and I freak out and then I scream out for my mom, okay? I'm hollering because we live in a huge house. It's built on, okay? So my house is huge and it's a maze and it's all one level. So not long after I screamed, I get this little like tap at the door, but it's kind of weird because she doesn't open the door and she's talking soft, but it sounds like my mom. And I didn't question it, okay? She was like, hey babe, you okay? I heard you hollering. And I was like, I think I seen something go past my window, Mom. And then she goes, oh, okay, it's probably nothing. Probably a bird. Owl, something. And I was like, I don't know, Mom, it was really big. And she was like, I wouldn't worry about it, sweetie. It's okay. Okay. And so she goes back, I'm assuming. And I'm just laying there. And then literally a minute later, my mom opens the door and she's looking at me and she was like, hey, I heard you hollering. Kind of baffled about it, but I was like, just play along, you know, because at this point I don't know what's going on. So I look at my mom, you know, and I repeat the whole story. And she acts completely different, okay? She's like, come with me. And she said, I want you to stay right here. And she makes me stand next to where we had a landline. Basically, we didn't have a cell phone when I was a kid, and I was standing right next to the house phone. And she was like, I'm going to go get my gun. By the way, my mom was bad. She was like, I'm going to go get my gun and walk around the house and make sure everything's okay. My dad was at work. And she was like, I'm just going to go around the house. We'll make sure everything's okay. And also, I should add, it was unusual that he was on night shift. He was usually day shift. I think something was just going on at work. I don't know. I'm standing by the house phone. My mom makes her rounds around the house. I'm guessing nothing happened. She came back in. She was like, everything's okay. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna sleep with you if you don't. I'm like, I'm gonna go sleep with you on the couch. And she was like, okay, that's fine. And then as we're laying on the couch, I'm on one end and she's on the other. I look down at her. So, why did you knock on my door originally? And you told me that it was probably a bird and to not worry about it. I was like, what made you come back and change your mind? And she said, I don't know what you're talking about.
I'm going to tell you an Appalachian ghost story that my grandpa has passed down to me from his mother's house. So my great grandmother, they actually owned a giant, like, classic plantation home that was in Gainesboro, Tennessee, right next to Roaring River. This plantation home had actually been a hospital in the Civil War area. That was a neutral hospital for both Northern and Southern soldiers. You can imagine with all the deaths that happened here and the things that followed it. There is a famous private cemetery behind it called the Gore Family Cemetery, and it is the same gorge as like Al Gore and, you know, General Gore and all the different famous Gores that are involved with that. When he was little and he lived there, he would frequently go visit the cemetery back there. It was always real spooky and creepy looking because anytime it would rain, where it's right next to the river, or if the weather had changed, it would fog up right around that cemetery. And his mother actually asked him why he liked to go down there and play so much. And he said, well, I don't have any other friends up here, and the little girl in the cemetery always likes me to play with her. And at this, my Granny Maud, which was his mother's name, was terrified because she knew very well about the property, and she was Irish. Their original name was O'Cassidy, last name O'Cassidy. And so they knew of all like the fae and the folklores of like the spirits and stuff. And if you all know about like spirits and trapping, the rivers serve as a boundary. So when you have a cemetery right next to a river, it is supposed to have a lot of activity because the spirits can't move away from the graveyard because the river traps them there. That goes back a long, long, long ways if you want to look into that. So he would frequent the cemetery as a little boy to play with the girl that he said he could always see in the cemetery. And she was always in the fog wanting to play there. This gives me chills knowing how my grandpa was a doctor. Like, he was very, very, very serious. He, you know, military doctor, you know, served at, you know, it state that he was a very serious, very intelligent, very smart man. But he could remember this clear as day, the little girl in the cemetery. And I just can't imagine, you know, getting to see, I grew up going to that house and seeing that cemetery. I could not imagine going out there by myself, like, at all. Especially if I saw a little girl out there, I would not be able to handle it. But, you know, it just goes back to kids don't have that veil that adults do. So maybe the adults in the area couldn't see it. This was just one of many stories. That area was very well known to have a lot of disembodied voices, a lot of what people call ghost lights. And I can't imagine with all that death from the Civil War, what was around that area. Another famous story from that area is one night the whole family was awoken by this groaning noise. They tried to find the source of this groaning noise, and imagine this house only has electricity in the central room, and it's huge. It's like a mansion, and they're having to walk around with like candle lights trying to figure out where this noise is coming from. And this disembodied voice of this groaning just down the hallways into the different rooms. It went into the attic at some point, and then it eventually faded outside. And guess where it wound up at? It wound up at that cemetery. And it gives me chills talking about that because I've been there, I've walked those halls a million times, and that place always gave me the creeps.
Let me tell you the spookiest story I've heard come out of the Appalachian Mountains, and it's all documented, not just lore. This may be the haint story of all haint stories. There were tons of witnesses, and it became such a big deal that professors from Knoxville even got involved. This was a 9-year-old girl named Bertha Seibert. In 1938, in Lee County, Virginia, she experienced nightly bed shaking. The bed shook so violently that men had to stand on all four corners and try to hold it down. The little girl would just lay perfectly still while this was happening. Lots of her neighbors and relatives witnessed this. They heard noises that they said sounded like a rat gnawing on wood. Wallpaper reportedly peeled itself off of the wall. They saw a hand appear above Bertha's head. The bed sheets were said to withdraw from the touch of onlookers. Bertha was moved to a relative's house, Raymond Minor. They wanted to move her to see if it would stop and to also avoid all the townspeople coming to their house to see this. A relative of Raymond Minor actually messaged me and was like, hey, did you know about this story? Bertha said that she saw something white and fuzzy that pulled her hair. All of this got so bad that she would cry when it was time to go to bed. This got national attention in the press. They rolled it down to noticeable contractions of her stomach and thigh muscles. The people that witnessed this laughed at that explanation. They said there's no way that the girl's body could have done this. This went on for about 3 months and then it stopped. This is a picture of her afterward. Bertha later got married, raised a family, and died at 57 years old in 1986 from crippling arthritis. So what do you think? Was this a haint?
Hey y'all, today's spooky story time from Tennessee comes from my work dad, and the story takes place in Unicoi, Tennessee, sometime in the 80s. Now, work dad's name is Kevin, and he's been with who is now his wife ever since they were young teens, and they got together in 10th grade. His wife's name is Tammy, and at this point in time, she lived with her parents on Tyler Street in Unicoi. That day, Kevin had just taken Tammy out on a date to a movie, and he just dropped her home at her house, gave her a goodnight kiss, and he started to make his way back to his car in the driveway. On his way back to the driveway, even though it was in the dark, it was 9 p.m., he swore that he heard a voice coming from the forest behind their house, and it was a voice whispering, saying, "Hey, Kevin, over here." He said that first he tried to ignore the voice because, just using logic, why would somebody be in the woods? And he thought, well, maybe it was just a different Kevin or something. He goes to try to start up his car, and his car will not start. The engine will not turn over. So he then rolls down the window again to try and listen to the engine of his car, and he hears the voice even louder coming from the woods behind Tammy's house. Kevin, come here." He said there was really no reason for there to be any kind of engine trouble. It was not freezing. It was not cold enough for the car to be giving him any kind of problems. And then when he heard the voice from the woods, it was almost as if he was just entranced. He said that he felt like just a moth to a flame. He said he couldn't look away, and he just started slowly walking towards the forest. Kevin got all halfway through Tammy's parents' yard before a porch light finally cut on, and it was Tammy's dad yelling out the door. He said, "Kevin, what are you doing?" And he said after that, luckily, it seemed to just snap him out of that, a mesmerizing phase that he was in, luckily. And he was like, you know what? I don't know. And he said that her dad was kind of acting like he was up to something. I guess he thought maybe her dad was thinking that he was going to try to sneak in or something, but that would just still be obvious because his car was in the driveway. So he goes back to the front of the house and he's like, well, my car won't start. So then Tammy's dad goes and then tries to also start up his car. Car won't start up for Tammy's dad either. Kevin then ends up having to stay on Tammy's parents' couch that night, and then the next morning, her dad went to go start up his car. Car started up normal. Nothing was wrong with it, didn't have a delay, nothing, normal. Later on, Kevin finally told his girlfriend Tammy what had happened with the car, and she was not even shocked. She was like, oh, things like that happen on this street, ever since I can remember, and started to tell him more stories what happened inside her house growing up. Tammy claims that in the same house, on the same street, Tyler Street, she said that one day her and her brother were both, I guess they were playing tag or something. They came running down the hallway, and her and her brother both at the same time saw what they called an entity. It wasn't like a normal ghost, what they said. They just called it an entity. And they said they ran up on it because they were just giggling and running and horse playing. And they said this creature just looked at them like it was shocked, oh, you can see me. And this thing just kind of went like it was terrified. And she had some kind of a vent on the ceiling of her hallway in their house, and that the entity just sucked up into the vent and disappeared. They scared the ghost. And in this very same house on Tyler Street, one of Tammy's cousins came over for a sleepover, and they were young. She claims that when they were waking up in the morning, they had some kind of another entity, not necessarily she said it didn't feel like a negative entity, just an entity, a very small one. She said they were just waking up, they lifted up a blanket, and they saw something that was floating towards them, glowing and shaped like a triangle, just kind of spinning, going towards them. When they told me this, I thought to myself, maybe that's the same thing as in the orb family, I guess, because it's not an orb, it's a triangle, but I wonder if it's related. Maybe it's angelic, I don't know. But her and her cousin claimed that they got scared, and they had picked up the blanket and covered up their faces, and then they had pulled the blanket back down again to look at it, and then the spinning triangle came through the blanket and was just spinning directly in front of their faces. Both of them saw it. Now, many of their neighbors that still to this day live on Tyler Street in Unicoi, they have very similar stories about their paranormal sightings there as well, and a new family has moved into her old house, so she has yet to go and talk to them about what they've seen.
So I just woke up from a nap, and I had this dream, and it reminded me of something really weird that happened to me, a year ago. And
and I just thought we'd talk about it. And I have lived in the Appalachian Mountains my entire life, and I've had some weird stuff happen. I grew up in the middle of nowhere on like a 100-acre farm, but now I live technically in city limits, but across the road from me, there's like the woods. So I'm laying in bed one night, and my husband and I start hearing something, and we're listening closer and closer, and it's chanting. It's like this group of, it sounds female voices chanting, singing, like several of them. So I do what any sane person does. I don't look out my window because it sounds close. But I put my phone out of the window and just start recording, right? It's really late at night. Bring my phone back in. My husband and I are listening. It's on the video. And we're like, oh my God, we caught it on video. We go to bed after it stops. And the next morning I get up because, I'm going to film a video on this and I'm going to insert the chanting. It's wiped. The video's there, but you can't hear anything but crickets when we heard it so clearly the night before. And I still think that is one of the strangest things that has ever happened to me here. Because, what do you mean you suddenly couldn't hear it?
I briefly lived and worked as a news reporter in West Virginia. I was sent on an assignment to go cover a Halloween maze that was being held at an abandoned amusement park. When I arrived to the amusement park, the owner of the amusement park, and he was the owner of the land, he met up with me to give me a tour. It was incredibly spooky. There was the abandoned Ferris wheel, there was the haunted maze, but he pointed out to me a memorial tombstone. There was a memorial tombstone for a child that had been killed on the property. This is the story he told me. The colonizers arrived and they wanted to take the land of the Shawnee tribe. So there was a big battle and basically they forcefully took their land. The Shawnee tribe then wanted to take revenge and they ended up taking that child and taking his life. So that's the origin of why the amusement park was haunted. When the park was an amusement park, he said there was a lot of weird, spooky things that happened. He said several people did lose their lives, but there were so many sightings of seeing a child on the swings and people hearing voices. He says a lot of people have reached out to do seances there, which they have. I felt very compelled to do a prayer while I was there to acknowledge the people that had lost their lives there, including those that did not have memorial tombstones. After I did the prayer, I did notice the energy felt a little lighter, but it was still spooky nonetheless.
Most funerals go the way they're supposed to. People cry, people sing, the preacher talks, the ground takes, the world turns. But every now and then, a funeral goes sideways. The flowers wilt too fast. The casket won't stay shut. The weather turns all at once, like the sky just heard some news, and it didn't like it. Mountain folks remember those days. We tell those stories with our voices low, because when a funeral goes wrong, it doesn't just embarrass the living, it wakes the dead. While the preacher spoke over Luther's grave, a breeze rose out of nowhere, a strange, twisting draft like the air was being pulled out of the earth. One gust hit the flowers on the top of the casket so hard that half of the wreath toppled off. In mountain burial customs, flowers falling feel like an argument. That night, a farmhand heard knocking from a direction of Luther's grave. Always 3 solid raps, like someone insisted on being heard. The knocking forced Luther's brother to confess. Luther had written a new will leaving money to the widow of the man he had wronged. The brother had torn it up. You can lie while you're living, but the grave doesn't play along forever. After a month of nightly knocks, the brother broke. He paid the widow what she was owed. Together they walked up to the grave, and the widow set a fresh wreath on the stone. Rest now, she said, not kindly, but firmly. The knocking stopped. Funerals are for the living, but the dead keep the receipts. When the rites go wrong, the earth refuses to settle.
They told me not to answer anything in the Appalachian Mountains, even if it sounds human. So a couple years ago, I went hiking through the Appalachian Mountains with one of my friends. We weren't doing anything too crazy, just like a 2-day overnight trip, just on one of the trails. Before we headed out, one of the locals at the gas station asked where we were going, and we let him know that we were just going to go to the Appalachian Mountains. And he just kind of paused and looked at us, and he said, okay, whatever you hear out there, don't respond to it. We kind of just laughed it off, but I really wish we didn't. The first night was pretty normal. We got there, we set up, we made some food. But further into the night, that's when things got a little eerie. It got really, really quiet. And when I say quiet, I mean like dead quiet. No bugs, no wind, no other weird noises. At some point when we were sitting in our tent, my friend asked me, "Do you hear that?" And I said, "No, hear what?" And it was my name being called very, very faintly. It was coming from somewhere in the trees, and my immediate thought was somebody was messing with us or another hiker was messing with us. So I unzipped the tent and I stuck my head out and I said, "Hello?" My friend grabbed my arm and he said, "Don't." And then that's when I realized the very faint voice had the same tone as my friend, the same voice. It sounded exactly like him. And then we heard it again, from the distance, my name, in the tone of my friend's voice, but this time it was a little closer. This time it was coming from a different direction, like it was able to move without making any noise at all. And this went on for the next hour. Sometimes it was my voice calling his name, so it was switching off. Sometimes it sounded like somebody was just talking. Sometimes it sounded like somebody was crying, weeping. At times it sounded like it was right outside of our tent. We never checked. We didn't respond. We actually wound up falling asleep at some point, and then when we woke up the next morning, everything felt normal again. Birds, wind, sunlight. We began to pack everything up. We were trying to quickly get out of there because we were spooked from the night before. And as we were leaving, we passed another hiking group, and they said, "Did you hear any noises last night?" And we just kind of paused. And then they said something that really stuck with me. They said, "Sometimes people hear voices at night, and the ones that respond back, they don't usually come back the same." Obviously, after that, we decided to skip the second night, and we just headed back to our car, and we left. And we have not been back there since, because whatever was out there knew exactly what we sounded like, and it knew our names.
Imagine you're hiking alone in the Appalachian Mountains, and not the more populated part, but the more dense, kind of, you're very much alone part. Kind of place where the trees grow so thick that it blocks out the sky. We're talking deep Appalachia. Imagine you're standing there in a place where there should be no people, and all of a sudden you hear laughter. Children's laughter. But there are no children, because like I just said, nobody is supposed to be out there. Sound coming deeper from the woods, and you don't know what to do. You just freeze and you stand there. Every bone, every muscle in your body is telling you not to follow the sound. Now here's where that story of fiction kind of flows into a story of non-fiction when you enter the Scottish Highlands. Once you take that 4,000-mile trek over there, you'll hear versions of that exact story. That's where today's rabbit hole truly begins. The little people, the hidden people, the good folk, or sometimes even referred to as the fair folk. Tiny beings that supposedly live out in the mountains, and they've terrorized humans for centuries. Scotland and Appalachia have way more in common than just similar stories, though. They're actually connected in a way that most people don't even realize. Around like 480 to 490 million years ago, those two land masses were one. Basically the same like mountain building event that built the Appalachians also built the Scottish Highlands. I always say that the Appalachian Mountains are older than bones, older than dinosaurs, and the Scottish Highlands are not much younger. Which is probably why both places feel so ominous and ancient, like it's hard to explain. And centuries later, another connection between the two lands formed, and that would be its people. During the 1700s and the 1800s, a bunch of Scottish Highlanders actually migrated to Appalachia. They ended up settling in the mountains. They brought their music, they brought their cultures, brought their superstitions, and they brought their stories. And with those stories, one of them emerged about the little people. In Scotland, these beings were often referred to as fairies. If you're imagining like Tinkerbell or Silvermist, then you better stop right now. Because the Highland fairies are absolutely terrifying. They aren't cute little magical creatures, they're dangerous. Could kidnap people, they could steal children, place babies with changelings, cause sickness, literally driving people insane, and also driving travelers off of the side of cliffs. Most any Scot will tell you that this is not just a story, it's not just folklore, it's very much based in truth. Because they thought that it was very truthful, they would leave offerings to these beings like milk, bread, butter, small gifts, little things like that. It wasn't because they loved them or enjoyed their company, it was because they feared them, so they were like giving them things to like, here, don't kill me please, here you go. The goal was never friendship, it was always survival. You always wanted to make these things happy, right? Because if you ever offended one of these things, it could ruin your entire life. Now let's jump across the ocean, okay? Because Native American tribes of Appalachia also had supernatural stories kind of like this. The Cherokee tribes told stories of translates to the little people. Unlike the fairies of the Highlands, the Yunwi actually were a little bit less malicious. Don't get me wrong, they definitely could be, but they were also very helpful. Or they could be very helpful. Some of these types of fairies would actually warn hunters and travelers of impending doom or danger. Now, this is a story that I read or listened to a couple of years ago. I can't remember which one. Of a 411 missing, person who's out there looking for the people. Okay, what am I saying? I don't know. He ended up getting stranded out there and lost himself, and he actually came across these fairies or whatever, and they ended up giving him medicinal advice. Ended up helping him fix himself up just enough to get out of the woods by himself. Some stories even say that the fairies of that side of the world would literally protect the children, but there's always a catch. As with everything, there's always a catch. And the catch with this was that you had to respect them. If you even so much as mocked them one time, you could be in serious danger, girl. If you've spent time online at all, or even at all on my page, then you've heard a lot of stories about Appalachia. Regardless, many of those stories end the same way. Basically just this primal feeling that you should not be where you are right now. And Scottish stories are almost identical to the Appalachian Trail mountain stories, whatever. Like I said, it's because they have this long history together. They're connected, bro. It's all connected. In the Highlands, there's these mountain ranges that are specifically known to be entrances to the Fae's home. Not just their home, it's a portal. It's I've talked about portals before in Appalachia, but as I'm saying, everything's connected. There's definitely these things over in Scotland too. There have been reports of people seeing fairy realms. There's this thing, you walk through the mountain basically, and there's the fairy realm. It's not Earth anymore. Seemingly so. There are even stories about travelers who heard music playing from underground around these areas. There is also this idea around the Highlands that there's this thing called fairy paths, which are invisible little kind of animal trails almost. If you end up building one of these fairy paths on your property, bad things will happen. Livestock will die. Families even become sick. And terrible, terrible accidents occur. To this day, there are actually roads in Scotland that are diverted as to avoid the fairy paths. What's even creepier about the comparison between these two places is that both Appalachia and the Scottish Highlands have this time warping effect. In Scotland, there are stories of people who have entered these fairy mounds, the fairy realm, right? And only were there for a day or maybe a couple hours. But when they came out, they had been gone for years. Not months, not weeks, not days. Bro, I talked about this before on my page. What's even more scary about this one is that they didn't just come out feeling disoriented and they still got to go back to their families. No. Sometimes these people would go missing for so long in the fairy realm that they would come back out and every person that they knew and loved was gone. It was like they had just stepped into the future and it was just a whole brand new generation of people. So if you ever hear laughter out in the woods or music or see strange lights out in the mountains, it could definitely be the fairies of the Scottish Highlands or the fairies of the Appalachian Mountains. Whichever side you're on, they are very much the same.
People in the woods and they'll call your name and say, help. Help, and then you go out there trying to help, knowing you can't even fight.
You know what's crazy you say that?
What?
When I went to the Appalachian Mountains, that happened. We were driving up the mountain, and a lady was laying on the road, and she said, and of course it was my friend, he's white, he rolled down the window, and then he was like, how can I help you? And the lady said, my leg is broken, can you get out of the car and help move me to the side of the road? And he was like, sure, give me a second, pulled over, and then it didn't work.
So, I'm kind of thinking I may have invited an entity into my home. Not willingly, maybe inadvertently. I'm from the Appalachian Mountains. I'm from Northwest Georgia, so I'm part of that Appalachian Mountain. Kind of the foothills, but still, we're still in that Appalachian area. So I noticed the day before yesterday, my thermostat in the house is set at 72. So it's set at 72, the thermostat in my house, and it's 90 degrees outside. 90 degrees here in Georgia, outside. My thermostat is set at 72. But when I came downstairs, it was 61 degrees in the house. And I thought, okay, the thermostat's set at 72. It's 61 degrees. It shouldn't even be on running. So I turned it off. I turned the thermostat off. Manually turned it off. The thermostat is still off today. It's 90 degrees outside. It is 56 degrees inside my house. Thermostat is off. The air still keeps kicking on even though the thermostat is off. 90 degrees outside. Thermostat turned off. 56 degrees inside my house. And now I'm kind of a little scared. Like, have I accidentally let some type of entity into my home? I don't know. But I really need to find out.
Yo. What's up? What y'all doing?
If you feel like you're being watched by the trees here in Woodlands National Park, you are. There are dangerous creatures here in these woods that look exactly like trees, but they are very dangerous and they are out to get you. If you hear loud rustling in the woods or see a tree that is suspiciously out of place, report it to a park ranger immediately. We are currently conducting an investigation. James, that tree wasn't there a minute ago. James!
There is a chance that the stories that us Appalachian people tell you about the spooky stuff that goes on in our woods, you know, the Mothman, the cryptids, the not deer, the feral people, that we're all just making it up so that you Californians don't pack up your whole family and move here and turn a single-story ranch home into $1 million investment and ruin what's left of our natural beauty. You know, we could just be telling stories. But maybe we're not. And here's the thing, we're not going to tell them. So, you want to take the risk? I don't think you do. Country road.
Make sure to like and subscribe for more chilling mysteries. And until next time, stay safe, stay aware, question everything, and please stay out of the shadows.